Welcome to the deep dive. It's something you hear all the time, right? People often lump libertarians and conservatives together. They seem like natural allies, maybe standing together against things like socialism or government overreach.
Yeah, you see them marching the same direction quite often. It feels like a united front.
Exactly. But that apparent unity, well, what if it's actually hiding some really deep fundamental differences? So today, that's our mission. We want to peel back those layers, really explore the core distinctions between libertarianism and conservatism, specifically in American politics. We're aiming for real clarity here so you can understand what truly sets them apart.
Mm.
And to help us do that, we've dug into a really insightful article. It's by Joshua D Glawson called Libertarianism versus Conservatism, Two Diverging Visions of Society. We've pulled out the key insights for this deep dive.
And look, this isn't just some, academic debate. Understanding these differences is actually pretty critical, especially if you care about, well, the future direction of political thought or even liberty itself in America. Because when you look closely, these aren't just slight variations. They are, like the article says, two distinct worldviews. They have different priorities, different moral foundations, even different ideas of what a good society actually is.
So they might team up sometimes.
Sure, on specific issues, but their core philosophies, they can often put them at odds. Ideological opponents, even.
Okay, so let's get into it. If that's the perception, how deep do these differences really run? Where should we start? Maybe right at the foundations.
Yeah, the foundations are key. Let's start there. So conservatism. When you dig into its roots, you often land on thinkers like Edmund Burke. He's often seen as the father of modern conservatism. The conservative view is really anchored in preserving things, culture, customs, institutions that have stood the test of time.
Tradition, basically.
Exactly. Tradition. Respecting the wisdom passed down. Burke saw society almost like this fragile contract between generations. He was very wary of radical change, believed more in slow, evolutionary progress anchored in time-tested norms.
So the big question for them is often, what keeps things stable?
What will preserve order? That's a good way to put it. That's often the driving question.
Okay, and that feels like a really sharp contrast with libertarianism then, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Because for libertarians, the main anchor isn't really tradition itself, it's individual liberty.
Spot on.
They don't seem to fear change in the same way, especially if it's, voluntary and peaceful. It's less about holding on to the past.
Right. It's more about enabling individuals. Libertarianism leans heavily on John Locke, his natural rights philosophy, this idea that people have inherent rights, life, liberty, property that exist before any government.
Independent of government.
Precisely. And the only legitimate government, in this view, is one formed by consent, whose main job, really its only job, is to protect those rights.
That's the minarchist idea, right? Minimal state.
Exactly. Minimal state. Courts, police, national defense. That's it. The government isn't there to mold culture or redistribute wealth or tell people how to live virtuously. Locke even argued, look, if a government violates these rights, it basically forfeits its legitimacy.
Wow. So if conservatives ask what preserves order,
Libertarians flip it. They ask what protects liberty. That's their fundamental question.
that's fascinating. Okay, so those are the starting points. How does that difference, order versus liberty, actually affect their views on what government should do day to day? Because that's where it gets practical for most people.
Yeah, this is where you really see the divergence in practice. So conservatives, while they generally support limited government in theory,
You hear that rhetoric a lot.
you do. But they're often, as the article notes, more likely to endorse state action for certain things, like preserving morality, or social cohesion, or national identity.
So things like maybe banning certain drugs or promoting prayer in schools.
Those are classic examples. For many conservatives, the state can be a moral enforcer. It's a tool they might use to maintain a certain social fabric or ethical standard they believe is important.
Which is, again, a huge contrast with the libertarian view. The article says they oppose coercive power, period.
That's the core of it.
Yeah.
A fundamental opposition to the state initiating force against peaceful people. Full stop. Even if a majority thinks it's for the greater good.
Right. So no legislating virtue, no controlling markets beyond preventing fraud or force, no policing private, peaceful behavior.
Exactly. For them, freedom isn't just, not being in chains. It's about the presence of individual sovereignty, self-ownership, the right to make your own choices as long as you're not hurting others or taking their stuff.
Oh, okay.
So given these really different ideas about government's role, it naturally leads to a question about rights. How do they define rights? How do they apply them? It's more complex than you might think.
Oh.
Well, libertarians stick pretty consistently to natural rights theory. We talked about Locke, life, liberty, property, rights you're born with.
Rights the government doesn't give you.
Exactly. And crucially, these are negative rights, meaning they just require others, including the government, to not interfere. Your right to free speech means no one should silence you. It doesn't mean the government has to give you a platform.
Okay, negative rights, non-interference. But the article suggests conservatives are a bit more flexible. They shift between natural rights and positive rights depending on the issue.
That's the observation, yeah.
Oh.
They might absolutely champion natural rights when it comes to, say, gun ownership or religious freedom, things requiring non-interference.
But then,
the analysis points out, they might invoke what are essentially positive rights for other goals. Positive rights are things that require the government to provide something or enforce something.
Like what?
The article mentions examples like government-enforced national service, or maybe law and order crackdowns that might infringe on some liberties, or even subsidies to culturally favored institutions. These require taking action, taking resources.
Which sounds like a contradiction to the libertarians.
It does. The libertarian critique is sharp here. They argue this kind of inconsistency undermines the principle of equal liberty. From their viewpoint, if your supposed right requires taking someone else's liberty or property, their labor, their money, their autonomy, then, well, it is not a right at all.
It's just a claim on someone else.
Exactly. It is a claim to someone else's labor, money, or autonomy. They believe the government's job is solely to protect those natural negative rights, not create new positive ones that impose burdens.
Okay, let's shift to economics. This is an area where you often hear both groups sounding similar, right? Both claim to support free enterprise.
It's common ground, rhetorically at least.
But where do they diverge when, policies actually get made, when the rubber meets the road?
Yeah, this is a really clear divergence point. Think about pragmatic nationalism versus pure principle. Conservatives, while generally pro-market in spirit, are often willing to support tariffs, subsidies, or industrial policy when it serves, quote, national interest or political allies.
Like protecting certain domestic industries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The article points to things like Trump's administration, and again in his 2025 anti-capitalism tariff revival, aimed at, quote, protecting American jobs.
So for conservatives, the market can be a tool, a means to an end.
Often, yes. A means to national strength, or supporting a key constituency, or achieving some other goal they see as important. The market serves the nation, in a sense.
And for libertarians, that sounds very different.
It's fundamentally different. For libertarians, the free market isn't just an efficient system, it's a moral commitment.
A moral commitment? How so?
Because it's based on voluntary exchange. They see tariffs, for instance, not as protection, but as hidden taxes. They punish consumers. They distort peaceful, voluntary interactions.
So trade, even across borders, is seen as a right.
Exactly. As economists like Milton Friedman argued, voluntary trade between people, even across borders, is a natural right. So, while conservatives might use markets strategically, libertarians see free markets as an end in themselves because they embody individual choice, consent, and peaceful cooperation.
Got it. Okay, let's talk social policy. Individual choices, social norms. This seems like maybe the most visible area where they clash, the place where the differences really hit home for people.
Oh, absolutely. This is often where the philosophical differences become most stark in day-to-day life. Conservatives frequently seek to protect traditional values through legislation.
We've definitely seen examples.
Right. Think laws against drug use historically, bans on same-sex marriage, or pushing for restrictions on speech they consider harmful or un-American.
And the thinking behind that is?
The argument often is that freedom without morality leads to decadence. So society needs guardrails, and therefore some things should not be tolerated if they undermine that moral foundation. The state has a role in upholding those standards.
And the libertarian response.
It's a complete counter. While they might personally prefer a moral society, they fundamentally reject the government enforcing morality. The focus is all on personal responsibility, not state intervention.
So as long as you're peaceful.
Exactly. As long as individuals are peaceful, not violating anyone else's natural rights, their personal autonomy should remain intact. That's paramount.
Tolerance, then, is key.
Tolerance is the price of liberty, as the article puts it. And that doesn't mean state-enforced approval, mind you. It just means the government has no business punishing peaceful choices, even if those choices are unpopular or seem unwise to others.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit. Foreign policy, national defense, how the U.S. engages with the world. Do these underlying differences show up there too?
Oh, definitely. They play out significantly on the world stage. Conservatives generally lean towards a strong national defense and assertive foreign policy. There's often a belief that America needs to project power, protect its values and interests globally.
Which means supporting things like
Military interventions sometimes, foreign aid to allies, maintaining a pretty expansive global footprint. It's often about American leadership, backed by military capability.
and libertarians. That sounds like the opposite direction.
Pretty much. The libertarian position, championed by figures like Ron Paul, is generally to reject interventionism.
Why? What's their rationale?
Their view is that the military's job is primarily, almost exclusively, to defend the homeland, not to police the world.
So foreign adventures are seen as counterproductive.
Yes. They argue that these entanglements drain resources, they can provoke retaliation, and maybe worst of all, they entrench the very centralized power that libertarians inherently distrust.
So instead of military dominance,
They advocate for peaceful commerce, free trade, diplomacy, non-aggression. That's seen as the path to real stability and liberty, not projecting military power everywhere.
that is a huge difference in vision. Okay, building on that distrust of centralized power, what about the Constitution? How do they view the U.S. Constitution itself? Is it a fixed rule book or more flexible?
Another fascinating area. Conservatives, as the article notes, often invoke the Constitution as a sacred document. You hear that reverence in their language.
But the article suggests maybe their application isn't always rigid.
Well, it points out they may support broad interpretations when it aligns with their priorities. Examples given include things like executive actions on immigration or national security matters.
So even if they talk about originalism,
The idea of sticking to the founder's intent. Right. But the analysis suggests they can be quick to justify exceptions for emergencies or national greatness. Sometimes government is seen as that necessary tool to achieve big goals, and the Constitution might be interpreted in a way that allows that.
and the libertarian take on the Constitution.
They see it very differently. For them, it's fundamentally a limiting charter, not a blank check, meaning that even when the ends are noble, the means must remain constitutional, decentralized, and accountable. Strict limits are the whole point.
So they focus on things like federalism, enumerated powers.
Exactly. The Bill of Rights, all those mechanisms designed to fragment power and protect individual liberty, are paramount. They see government not as a tool to be easily wielded, but as a dangerous servant and a fearful master. The constant focus is on restraint.
Okay, one last area this article touches on, which feels quite profound, their basic cultural outlook, how they view change in society.
Yeah, this really gets to the heart of their different temperaments, you could say. The conservative outlook is often driven by what the article calls a sense of cultural loss.
A feeling that things are going downhill.
Often, yes. They might see decay, things like weakened families, secular values, rising crime, and globalist ideology. And the natural instinct then is to protect, to preserve,
And maybe use the state to push back.
and if necessary, to wield state power to recover what was lost. It could be a fight against perceived decline, trying to restore older virtues, or a perceived healthier past.
And the libertarian view on cultural change.
It's almost the opposite. They tend to see cultural change as inevitable and not necessarily a threat.
Less fear of new ideas or ways of life.
Generally, yes. They don't inherently fear pluralism or experimentation. Their core trust is in free people figuring things out, building better lives without a top-down plan.
So diversity isn't seen as a problem.
No, diversity of values can even be seen as a strength, with a key condition. As long as no one is forced to accept or pay for others' lifestyles. Their goal isn't to roll back the clock.
It's to
It's to roll back the state. They believe human flourishing comes from individual choice and voluntary cooperation, not from enforced conformity, whether old or new.
So bringing this all together, as people try to make sense of the political landscape, these different movements, what's the big takeaway for our listeners?
Well, it really circles back to that fundamental question the analysis poses. Is the purpose of government to preserve order or to secure liberty? That seems to be the core tension.
Order versus liberty.
Right. Conservatives often lean towards the idea that freedom must be subordinated to virtue. Society needs a moral structure, and that might mean limiting freedom sometimes to maintain it.
Whereas libertarians argue,
They argue the reverse. Freedom is the precondition for virtue. They believe true morality has to be chosen voluntarily. If it's coerced, it's not really virtue at all.
And the article's final thought really emphasizes this distinction.
It does. It concludes, liberty is not a subset of conservatism. It is its own proud tradition, one grounded in individual rights, peaceful exchange, and personal responsibility. Let us never confuse proximity for unity. Libertarianism stands on its own.
A powerful reminder not to conflate the two.
Absolutely. They might walk together sometimes, but they're on different paths with different destinations in mind.
So as a final thought for everyone listening, maybe reflect on that enduring tension. Order versus individual freedom. These are two very distinct philosophies offering really different answers about what makes a good society. How do you see those competing priorities playing out today, and which path, ultimately, do you think best fosters human flourishing? Something definitely worth thinking about.